Okay, good morning, everybody. And thank you to Tyler and Kim for inviting me. As I said, I'm a real estate attorney. What I usually tell most of my clients is that lawyers are a lot like doctors. You may have the greatest, cardiologist in the family or family friend. If you need brain surgery, they don't do you any good. Lawyers do different things. I don't touch anybody's divorce or family or bankruptcy. This is what I do. It's real estate litigation, and unfortunately, that brings us to where we are today, which is having to do with evictions and foreclosure moratoriums. One of the things that I do that's a little bit different in our office is that we handle both the transactional and the litigation side of real estate. So I'm hoping for the most part, I'm gonna try and keep it brief, but I'm hoping for the most part that a lot of what I'm gonna tell you is gonna be obsolete by next week. There are currently under the CARES Act, two different stays on evictions. One is at the federal level, which is through the CDC. One is through the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut allows you to evict somebody from a residential property or a commercial property. There's actually no difference for four reasons. One, if it's a pre-COVID default, all of those are pretty much gone because it's been over a year right now. One is if you have a serious default, which is more than 6 months accumulated, non-payment of rent. One is for a serious nuisance, which has been abused by a lot of attorneys who are just trying to get a pretext to get into court. So it basically means a criminal standard. It's more than just property damage. It has to be something that's actually involved the police. The fourth reason is that if you've got a homeowner, so it wouldn't apply in a commercial context, but a homeowner who has a bona fide intention to take back the property because they're going to live there. Any of those four reasons will get you back into court. On the federal level, the CDC moratorium, which is set to expire next week on the 31st, has a little bit, takes away a lot of those standards and really just focuses on the non-payment of rent issue. And the problem with both of those standards, especially for folks in your position, if you've got somebody who's trying to buy a house and they don't want to have a tenant in there, how do you get that tenant out? And forbearance of an eviction is not the same thing as forgiveness of that rent. People don't realize that if you're not making payments because you don't think you have to, eventually you're going to have to pay the piper. So all we're really doing is we're sort of putting a bowling ball through a garden hose in terms of the eviction process, where eventually that's going to, the garden hose is going to explode and we're going to have an overwhelming number of evictions down the line. For today's purposes, unfortunately, both of those standards, it's not just a simple application of a law. It matters a lot about geography. It matters a lot about what I call politics, and it matters a lot about money. So in terms of geography, New London is actually one of the better areas I find to continue with eviction processes, even in light of those two stays, because the courts so far have been willing to look at whether or not the applicant actually qualifies for those stays. And one of the conditions for the stay is that you have to have applied for any sort of governmental assistance. There was a program called THRAP, THRPA, which was a $4,000 tenant assistance that could be used again for residential or commercial for past due payments. That program is expired, even though not all of the money was spent. And there's a new program called Unite CT, which will now cover up to $10,000. Both of those programs required landlords and tenants to work together. So the tenant would be the applicant, the landlord would have to prove the amount that's due and owing. The problem again for stuff like this is that for the $10,000, the landlord has to be willing to take 15% off the total amount that's due. The payments may not necessarily be all lump sum, and that if there is a payment arrangement that's worked out, you have to avoid any further collection or eviction proceedings against that tenant. And those programs could extend out 12 to 15 months. So one of the things that we do in our office is we do back rent collections. That's incredibly unique, I'm going to say. We don't refer it to collection agencies. We treat you guys and your clients as if they're the bank. So if somebody's got a $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 outstanding balance, we'll actually go through the process as if we were a debt collector. That's still the standard for the attorney. where we'll go and try and verify employment or income or anything else. People do remarkable things about disclosing their lives on social media, so it's not as difficult as you might think. It's just a lot of leg power. And then we'll actually go and start a regular collection action where we'll look to get wage garnishments, bank executions, or judgments for money payments for those back rents. Foreclosures, I'm going to just sort of jump around. I want to leave a lot of time for you guys to ask questions about what's going on in your neighborhood. But foreclosures are, for the most part, the same thing. Foreclosures have been allowed to proceed as of December 7th, 2020, but not on federally backed loans. So the FHFA has put a stay through the end of June, I believe, on anything that is FHA, VA, USDA, any of the alphabet soups. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, SBA, kind of hit or miss as far as whether they've determined those to be federally backed. But the real problem for foreclosures is the fact that if you are a servicer, and there are fewer servicers than there are owners of the paper, there's no point in going forward with a conventional foreclosure if you're not going to go forward on the Fannie, Freddie, or FHA loan. So a lot of these things, again, are just sort of backing up and bottlenecked. And my concern, which I'm going to throw out to you guys, I'll just give you my opinion and you tell me. My concern is that I remember what happened in 6, 7, 8, 9 when all of these things reverted back to, you know, issues of mortgage insurance, and they ended up back in courts. We went from where we are today, where there's very little inventory, to a glut of inventory, which, you know, affected prices, affected, qualifications for new home buyers. Right now, you know, access to credit isn't what it was 10 or 15 years ago because of mortgage insurance. So, you know, I am hopeful that, you know, the government and all these different institutions have a plan in place to avoid having that sort of glut of properties all of a sudden flood the market, where it's driving down prices and making access to credit more difficult. I think, you know, time will tell, and certainly people in your position will be in the best position to make sure that you're guiding the right buyers and sellers to the right properties. So again, I kind of started this off with this big bubble about geography matters. What do you see in your like, I want to make this very interactive. What do you see in your area as far as evictions and foreclosures and sort of just the backlog of what's going on? How can I help you? Come on, this is free legal advice. Don't be shy now.
Well, I'm going to jump in over here because I'm having that experience with a multifamily that I have for sale, and tenants are actually, one of them is buying the property who hasn't paid rent, which I find blows my mind sometimes. The tenant upstairs decided they're not going to pay rent because if the guy cannot pay rent and buy the property, they figured they're not. So now we have an issue with the bank, and the owners don't understand that. Or one of the owners doesn't understand that. We have two different owners here. So it's really a challenging transaction.
It's very challenging, and Harriet, I appreciate the question. A lot of times that situation not only comes up, but it comes up also when you have a multifamily where you have a tenant who may not be paying rent and will not allow access for inspections. In the good old days, I used to be able to file a motion for access with the court, even if there was not an eviction pending, because under the terms of the lease, again, residential or commercial, the landlord has reasonable access. And if the tenant, prevents that access, we could go in and get kind of an expedited hearing to force the tenant to let the landlord in, or at least protect the landlord if they go in and use their key to do the inspections. Because, turnaround times have gone up, 400%. So what used to take me 2 weeks to get a hearing date is now taking me, 8 weeks to get a hearing date. It's a lot more difficult to try and enforce those access provisions or deal with somebody who's not paying their rent. The non-payment of rent really seems to be the area that they're trying to protect people under the CARES Act. And again, that covers both the federal and the state protections. So unless you're more than 6 months past due, nobody's going to touch anything having to do with that particular issue. And I think until that CDC declaration kind of expires, you're not going to see the sort of sense of consequence where somebody who said, well, I don't have to pay, now you do. And that's where those programs, the THRAP and the Unite CT programs, are going to become very popular and run out of money very fast, because when the ability to evict somebody from the property becomes realistic, and those turn times go back to 2 weeks. And in my experience, the judges are getting very, very frustrated with the fact that their dockets are getting backed up, and they see that people are they're not being fair. I don't have to pay, so I'm not going to pay. In the middle of a pandemic, you'll let it slide, but you know that that bill has to be paid. And a lot of the same judges who work in housing court also do the foreclosure docket. And their big concern is not the big property managers, but people who may have 1 or 2 investment properties. Their tenants are not paying rent. They may have an inability to pay their mortgage. How do you go forward on a foreclosure 6 months from now when the same judge just told that landlord that you have no right to replace a tenant who's not paying their rent?
Yeah, it's become very challenging for investors that do own, because the tenants don't pay and they can't pay. It's nice that they finally gave some relief to owners of multifamilies, and but still, in all, these tenants are never going to pay up. They get their money from to help them out and catch up, but they go and buy TVs and whatever. It's just frustrating.
Oh, incredibly frustrating. I mean, the point of the moratorium on evictions was supposed to be somewhat needs-based. Like, you had to show that your gross income was below a certain level, that you've made efforts to apply for assistance where it was, that your discretionary spending was limited, so that you were making a good faith effort to try and pay your rent or some part of your rent. And most courts across the state have abandoned that best efforts to make payment standard. They're just looking at, did you have a downturn because of COVID? Did you have a downturn in your employment? Do you make less than a certain level? And did you file the CDC declaration? We've got myself and one of my partners who are really litigators on the real estate front. And we've gone kicking and screaming, trying to enforce that particular protection to allow landlords to try and save face a little bit and not let their properties go down the tubes. But it is a struggle, and my fear for the marketplace is that once that moratorium is lifted, there still needs to be a mechanism so we're not driving down fair rental prices and fair market values of properties as everybody all of a sudden is in a big problem.
David, I have a question on timing. In Connecticut, isn't the eviction moratorium until April 19th or something like that?
So the state, yes, Susie, the state moratorium under the current executive order is April 20th. The CDC declaration expires March 31st. And for the most part, especially the legal aid societies, are focused more on the CDC declaration than the executive orders, because the executive order has that exemption for serious non-payment, serious nuisance, or bona fide intention to retake the property. A lot of the legal aid societies just look at the act of filing the CDC declaration as if that creates an automatic stay, the same way that you would if somebody filed bankruptcy. It's not supposed to be worded that way, but a lot of judges, especially I find in New Haven and Middlesex County, are much more receptive to the mere filing of the declaration.
And on number 4, as the exemption, homeowner who wants to take back the property and live there, does that also include, because I am seeing this out there, is the landlord who has 1 or 2 investments wants to take advantage of a great market, and their tenant is paying, but they don't want to own that property anymore. They want to take advantage of the higher price. Can they give the notice to the tenant who has been paying and maybe been a long-term tenant, it's time for you to go because it's time for me to sell? What do you see there?
Unfortunately, no. And that's been a very, very tricky area in this marketplace, where if you have an investor who wants to sell the property, that's not the same thing as a bona fide intention for them to live there. You almost have to set it up where you sell the property first, and then the buyer would exercise that intention to live there, assuming they're not already a tenant in a multifamily property. That's unfortunately affected a lot of FHA buyers, because typically in an FHA contract, you have to it has to be owner occupied. So if you're buying a multifamily and it's your intention to go in there, and even if it would be a violation of your loan application for you not to be there, you have to conclude that transaction before the court will let that fourth standard, that bona fide intention, kick in. They will not, so far in this marketplace, and again, we're in the middle of a pandemic, the court will not preemptively say that we're going to allow the eviction so that transaction can conclude.
Wow. So in this case, the tenant is in control of the landlord's property.
Unfortunately, 100% yes. The fear of, and let me back up a second. I'm going to editorialize. I think COVID is an absolute real thing. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I think we've gone way too far in terms of allowing tenants to have control over somebody else's property. There's no statistics that I've seen that justifies either the states or the CDC's claim that if you have all of these evictions, people are going to automatically become homeless, start living in the streets, and ramp up the spread of COVID-19. There's nothing beyond fear mongering behind all of that. I think that is a plan that's been used by far too many legal aid societies to try and justify getting state and federal money to support their ventures, because the money that is not being paid to the landlord is not going back into property taxes, is not going back to their mortgage payments. We're focused on the wrong things. But yes, unfortunately, because of that fear mongering, tenants have a disproportionate amount of control over what happens to the landlord's property. And there's no solution yet in place to how do you make the landlord whole. Even the Unite CT plan is saying that a landlord has to be willing to take a 15% loss, just for the privilege of getting, federal money. That's not fair either.
And come July, that will not be an issue with legislation, but you then go through the normal channels of filing an eviction, but except there's a bottleneck at that point in July, August, whatever.
Right. Well, I think depending on what happens in the next, certainly the next week with the CDC moratorium, and the next month with the latest executive order, both of which I think are going to have a lot of difficulty being extended, because there are 3 states that found the CDC moratorium unconstitutional. Not Connecticut, unfortunately, as yet, but there are 3 states that have at the federal court level addressed this federal question and found that it exceeds the authority, especially in a state like Connecticut, where the governor has executed the executive orders to protect tenants. Plus, vaccinations are up. I think they're going to have a hard time getting a further extension of either of those, but it wouldn't surprise me. Depending on when those 2 expire, I think you're going to have a very fast ramp up in terms of evictions. And then foreclosures are starting to pick up. But again, you can only really do conventional and portfolio type of foreclosures. Any of the government-backed loans are going to be delayed until July.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, I feel like the harbinger of gloom and doom. It's really not that bad out there, but it's very important, especially with you guys. I always, joke around that in terms of the totem pole of real estate, lawyers are not just the bottom of the totem pole. We're the mat that's underneath the totem pole. You guys are on top. You have the first contact with existing clients. You have, the first contact usually with not just buyers and sellers, but landlords. You have to be educated about, I would tell everybody, this is another topic for another day, but make sure you are up to date on all of your fair housing regulations and what you can and can't do, because that's going to be the next wave of attacks to try and, protect tenants or try and protect, people who are not happy with having to move. But you guys have that first touch with everybody. So you're going to be the educated realtor is really the best defense to, or best impetus to a successful real estate market, because you're going to be able to guide people into what they can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do. And the golden rule really is you have to represent the deal. You never represent a buyer or a seller. Okay. I say that all the time. I used to do litigation exclusively when I first got out of law school, and I loved it because I was a competitive person. But in litigation, you have a winner and a loser. I love doing real estate because everybody wins. The seller bag of money, the buyer gets a new house, the realtors get paid, the lawyers get paid, everybody gets what they want. The problem breaks down when somebody wants a little bit more. Okay, if I'm trying to get an unreasonable exception for an inspection clause that makes it impossible for my seller to carry all of their costs, that's not a win. If I'm really prejudicing a seller to represent my buyer, I didn't do a good job, because now the seller may not sell. It may cause delays. The deal is what matters. That's where everybody wins. It's not the process of saying you got a little bit more. You don't represent a buyer or a seller. If you do, you do it at the expense of the deal.
Let's shift into the commercial, back into the commercial market. I don't know about you guys out there, but I always keep my eye open for potential new headquarters for our association. But I am not seeing any reductions in any commercial or commercial land. If not, they've even gone higher, which is just perplexing to me. The residential market is understandable, but the commercial market is also going up. So let's talk about that. And then also, at what point are we going to be seeing things opening up? Anybody?
I'll jump in if you don't mind. On the commercial side, I think a lot of times commercial landlords are piggybacking on the residential market, and the lack of available space on the residential side is artificially propping up commercial properties. I think especially at your level, you're seeing people who kind of are overinflating the value of their commercial space. There's far too many businesses that have learned that they can go on and do Zoom meetings, and they don't need to occupy those commercial spaces. And the values are being artificially propped up, not against demand, but against the perception that God's not making any more real estate, so this is really, really valuable. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about representing the deal. I would, from your perspective, I would much rather have my property be occupied, even if it's at a value that I think is not worth what I want it to be worth, than to hold out an artificially high value. And I think, a lot of people in the commercial world that I've seen are kind of holding out hope that when things go back to whatever normal is, prices will go back, occupancy will go back, that demand for, commercial space is going to go back to what it was at pre-COVID levels. And I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing far too many businesses, ours included. We were looking to buy a brand new building right before COVID hit. Half of our office now works from home. We've cut our overhead. Our efficiency is up. And I think a lot of businesses are going to be doing the same thing, where they don't need to occupy that commercial space. And it's just, it's just, I don't know how you readjust at your level for what the fair rental value is for the commercial property, but there are available units. It's just a matter of getting those renters aligned to what that new fair rental value should be.
I mean, getting the landlords aligned.
Landlords especially. And look, a lot of people who own property, whether it's residential or commercial, landlords have taken a hit. And the mistake that landlords make is they try and make it back all at once. If you've owned a commercial property, or you're a property manager and you've got a residential tenant not paying their rent, you can't take that pound of flesh out of somebody who's looking for commercial space. The commercial marketplace is a completely different animal, even though a lot of the landlords may very well be the same. And we all know that anything that's 5 units and above, industrial, commercial, retail, that's different. Okay, anything that's 1 to 4 units is residential, even though it may be an investment property. But you have a lot of the same people who own both. You know, you've got to try and create that new paradigm where you're able to show landlords that this is what fair market value is, fair rental value is for this space in this marketplace, and make it collaborative. Maybe, you know, I'll throw it out to you guys. Maybe the answer is, you know, more creative lease ideas. How can you have some sort of escalator clause in there that goes with what market trends turn out to be, so that you can get people in? You know, I think landlords who kind of get into this rut find that they need to make it all back at once, and the longer their properties stay vacant, the more they want to get when they get a tenant in, because they need to recoup those losses. Where I'd rather see that they get somebody in sooner, maybe at a lower value today, but get them invested in, you know what, I can make my business work where everybody's in a commercial space under one roof. I can go back to the old way of having everybody in an office or a retail space or a commercial space. Get everybody in and used to that paradigm, and the prices will follow. But I think trying to keep those prices artificially high is going to keep tenants out of that retail space, and then it's going to have to be repurposed for something. Because if people don't go back into using that commercial space, there's going to be much less movement in that commercial area. They're going to have to be repurposed.
What time frame do you see for that reality?
I think that's going to follow a lot the residential marketplace. I think, again, you know, because landlords on the commercial side are looking to recoup their losses kind of in a hurry, I think they're going to play a wait and see approach to how bad does the foreclosure market affect their world. If foreclosures ramp up, you know, rapidly, July, August, September, that's the end of the summer season, and will put a bigger damper on the third and fourth quarter. If those go up and prices are pressed down because you have this glut of properties, I think landlords are going to be scrambling to try and get people in to get what they can get at that point. If we have further delays in the moratoriums, it sounds like the courts are trying to hire more mediators, even though they're not hiring more judges. If that delays the foreclosure process and kind of thins it out a little bit, I think you're still going to have commercial landlords into first quarter of next year keeping prices artificially high, hoping to kind of catch that whale, if you will, to get to make up for those losses.
Tim, you care to comment on that? I know you keep an astute eye on this stuff.
I love what I'm hearing, because it's, I like to listen, because he's definitely got a different perspective than I do, but we're right in alignment. I'm finding that the data is showing one thing. I can look at CoStar across the state and see that, the retail side is completely underwater. But then you look at New London County and it doesn't look like it's that bad. The multifamily side of things looks extremely healthy, but I think the underbelly of it all is we're not seeing the right numbers. These tenants, I mean, we've got if I just looked at the numbers, I'd say one thing, but again, I go back to, we've got about 100 units out there up in Bill Chang's area, and we have 25% of those tenants that just are not paying. And, that's not reflected in the numbers. So there are some things that are to come that are going to shed light and, create a reality that we have not seen yet. It seems like it's just sunshine right now and we've weathered the storm, but I don't think so. I think that we just haven't seen it yet. And I don't want to be doom and gloom either. I'm seeing opportunities out there there are some serious opportunities. And that's what we're focusing on, is the ability for our sellers to sell right now. And some buyers, there are some opportunities as well. So, but I don't think you can trust the numbers. I don't think we can just look at what we're seeing that's reflected out there. You almost have to be on the streets, talking to the landlords and talking to the tenants and saying, hey, what do you guys think? Where are we going with this? And I think in the office side of things, David's right on. A lot of these tenants are just realizing that they can do things a lot more efficiently than they ever had. The fact that we're all on Zoom and extremely comfortable with it says it all.
It really appears that the government intervention is sort of falsely protecting the market. So, which is what I'm seeing, that everything looks fine, like you say, Tim. But Tim, would you agree with David's time frame where he's looking beyond foreclosure, eviction moratorium, July, August, September? But if the government pushes that out, then we're looking at the first quarter of next year, where it looks like the rug might be pulled out, the government rug will be pulled out, and the real deal will be exposed. Does
Yeah,
that sound about right?
it's a game of kick the can, and that's really, I don't think we have any idea until we see where that can lies. So, and then after that, like you said, there's a bottleneck right now. So maybe 6 months after that time frame, we're going to see reality kick in.
Okay, so we have a question from Lisa. Where did that go, that question? Do you think retail tenants have any average, did you mean leverage? Retail tenants have any leverage at this point when negotiating a new lease? At this point, good question.
Absolutely. Yeah, the data shows it. Yeah, there's huge leverage.
Look, there's always leverage if you've got the money to make payments. Now, again, it's really just a matter of shifting the paradigm. If you're a tenant that's capable of making payments in a retail space and you want to try and shift your lease and renegotiate terms that benefit you and benefit the landlord, cash is king. If you can show that you've made payments, and look, if there's plenty of opportunities, if you don't renegotiate with me on terms that's favorable to everybody, there's lots of space where I can go somewhere else.
I'm not seeing that lots of space though, David. I'm not currently seeing any difference, at least in the markets that we're looking at for our association. I am not seeing that piece of leverage there. Give me a better deal or we'll go somewhere else. Well, those somewhere else's have not popped up yet.
Well, I think I'm grateful to hear that about that part of Eastern Connecticut. I know sort of along the 95 corridor here and the central part of the state, there are a lot more places. Hartford is replete with them. My office is in Hamden. I live in Southington. I cover the whole state. Hartford and Hartford County, there's plenty of places where you can almost leapfrog from one place to the next if you're not getting that. If Eastern Connecticut is doing better in terms of numbers and keeping vacancies low, that's awesome. And I hope it spreads to the rest of the state.
Well, for the rest of you guys, please explain to me why we're not following suit with Hartford, New Haven, the bigger commercial spaces. Is it because we were already in a depressed market? Talk to me about that. Norm, you must have some thoughts about that. Either Norm.
Well, London County is not New Haven. It's not Hartford. This is London County, and it's not going to get any better. Our vacancy is horrible. It's about 18%. You drive anywhere around the major areas, you see for lease. These guys are not getting the rents they want. In some cases, as David pointed out, they have raised the prices, which is stupid, because it's just going to stay empty longer. As far as recovery goes, it all depends on what kind of political games are going to be played. And as far as 6 months from now, a year from now, you got to wait and see what the next episode is in the political game from Washington and also the political game from Hartford. I mean, there's no way to predict what's going to go on, and we're not going to go back to the normal that we all experienced. I've experienced 2 changes in normal.
We just lost Norm. I'm sure he'll drop back in. Jack Wiesa, I know you said that you've got nothing coming on the market for listing. So you've got a bunch of things under contract, but the future, the inventory shortage is affecting commercial too. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, they, properties that we had listed, owners don't, they just, don't want to, follow through anymore. They're trying to do it on their own. And, to follow what Norm was saying, I believe that the, environment right now with federally and statewide, with the COVID, overlay, that the whole environment is just, not conducive for any kind of transactions. It's negative as far as I can see.
All right, so do you want to go ahead and jump into our marketing minutes for each individual? Thank
As far as small retail spaces and commercial, they're not going. You know, you're looking for probably the larger units, which there's not as many out there that I'm seeing. But as far as individual small offices or in a big complex, they've been on the market for over a year. Some of them have been maybe more than a year. They're not moving. I mean, I have some, and I'm not even getting appointments for them. So it's not the market we were in. Everybody's working from home. There's no need for office space anymore.
Yeah, that
Area, do you have space in Norwich area?
Not for that much that you need.
that being said, in Mystic here, we're seeing it's totally different. It's a healthy market. It's vibrant. We're seeing our building, which we only have 3 spaces available, and they're very small spaces. It seems like they're turning. So it seems healthy, at least in this building. So, and that's the other buildings, like 107 Wilcox, 60 Willow. Those are all rented, fully leased as well. So it's weird because, you know, we're looking at numbers, we're hearing the reports, but yet we're continuing to lease up spaces. So they are shorter terms, and the, you know, the tenants are negotiating a bit. So there are some subtle changes that are taking place, but. And to David's point of view, I just pulled up, you know, Middlesex versus New London County on the retail side of things. New London County looks somewhat healthy, and Middlesex County doesn't look great at all. And then the state had negative absorption the past 12 months of around 340,000 square feet. So it's not a pretty picture across the state. New London County seems to be an outlier. So I'm curious too, what is it? You know, why are we still ticking along? I don't know.
So I got a question more than an answer for that, Tim. I mean, do you see a lot of mobility in New London County? Like, you know, it seems to me that if you've had, you know, whether it's on the commercial or residential side, somebody who's from Stonington, Mystic, that area, it's probably generational. Their families have been there for quite a long time. They've had, you know, businesses that may have changed form or substance, but they're staying in the area. Where I think that there's a lot more mobility in, you know, Middlesex County, for example, where you'll have somebody who'll go from East Haddam and they're trying to, you know, move into Middletown, or they've only been in, you know, in one of those places, more transient than the sort of generational settling that you're going to find. My son plays football. We have a new independent league where it's kind of an all-star team from across Connecticut, and everybody who comes from that Ledyard, Norwich, New London County area, their parents played football there. Their grandparents were from the area. Aunts and uncles are all from that area, because when we have to travel, it's a big deal for folks that come from that part of the state, because they, you know, everybody's there and they've always been there. I'm curious if that's a real thing, or I'm just, you know, just grasping at straws.
I don't know. I'm from Maine originally. My family tree's a wreath, so I really can't comment on that one. Silence. I like it.
Whereabouts in Maine?
Skowhegan, near Augusta, Waterville.
I know that area very well. My daughter went to school up in Waterville.
Kobe.
No, MCI.
Great school.
Yep. I like that area a lot.
Well, you gotta wonder if the water access is a thing, right? And also, the government, the military contracts, EB, that's securing employment for years to come. So that's gotta be a thing. And then the New York migration to Connecticut along the shoreline, and even up into Windham County has been a thing.
I think it's that. I think you're right with the sub base. I think it's those subcontractors that are all being employed by EB.
Yeah.
That is a huge chunk of the industry here.
Yeah.
So that could be it.
And Susie, I think you're right. I think that New York migration has definitely created a very volatile market in Fairfield County. A lot of the people that are moving from New York into Fairfield, those people are now moving into, places like Danbury, the Naugatuck Valley, and parts of New Haven County. But yeah, there's a lot of transition in that area.
Bill, why don't you speak to Windham County, and commercial and migration from New York and or anything going on in Windham County compared to the shoreline?
Northeast of Windham County is pretty much on the housing side is a shortage, residential side. At some last our meeting, town of Killingley, so EDC also mentioned there is a 300 job in next 3 year opening. So definitely it's a need more housing in Killingley, Northeast, Quiet Corner area.
What kind of jobs did you say?
That's a manufacturing job. Killingley iPod have 2,400 people working there, from Frito-Lay to McDonald, so YA, warehouse, 500,000 square feet there. And also some United Natural Food, they shipping out to, I believe this is, all over New England. So Frito-Lay is a hire more than 1,000 people there too, they different shift, the higher pay in area. So to say that also is Killingley, the mill rate is lower, so about 26, 27, because power plant pay for the bigger chunk, and MTE power plant is coming in the second one, they talk about for a year now. So that will be bringing in another $3 million more, tax dollar if that's happening to the school system too. So Killingley is doing well, and Northeast Quiet Corner is doing well. People from all over from North. Look like the Massachusetts come down, and Rhode Island is moving in too, so because remote area just look like, the attorney, say, people work from home, everybody work from home, so that's we need Wi-Fi only. So other than that, commercial is mostly talking about solar panel, they're opening, and plus, saying somehow it's hard to get a new developer to come in because the housing cost to build and compared to the market absorption, say now it's 300,000. Usually in our areas at 250 or lower. Now it's about 300. Even 55 plus is 350. So go crazy.
And not a lot of it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Windham County actually is as my knowledge, Windham County is moving really well. So
not feeling the pain of the pandemic when it comes to housing and commercial.
Not at all. Even earlier, Tim mentioned about say the unit, the multi-unit, say in Killingley, Northeast Quiet Corner, say I believe the team will be pocket the commission really quick.
You have that Amazon new building in Plainfield.
Yeah, they talk about that. The fulfillment, they talk about that. Yes. So a little bit bigger chunk, say that's a dog track, say dog track site.
Yeah.
So Plainfield actually is have quite few, industrial, the commercial land. So when we met Northeast commercial realtor meeting in the town hall, the Plainfield town hall, and they do, they promote really well now. See, that's I'm trying to push some of the land, opening land to, they sell it for less. So doing good. Wyndham is doing good, just like look like the Eastern Connecticut is doing really good compared to, the Harvard area,
Curious about restaurants, entertainment centers, bowling alleys, gyms, movie theaters. What do you guys have to say about that stuff?
I can say that, from my area, I owned a restaurant for over 30 years, so I sold it 6 years ago for my portfolio. A restaurant special is who have a takeout. Okay, takeout is doing really well. Because say since all the benefit from federal government with the chair unemployment, so far so good, except they don't pay the rent for their apartment. So that's a landlord. They have a one big headache is the apartment. Don't get paid. The landlord don't get paid. Other than that, the restaurant in my area, mostly the restaurant they do really well. So even my brother still have a restaurant. He doubled his business. So that's amazing.
Susie, I think the banker that we had here at the last meeting indicated that there were about 60 restaurants that were going to be closing up in the Hartford area. I'd be kind of curious to see what it's like in the Hamden, New Haven area as far as restaurants. If they're closing up or, going to survive this pandemic.
Well, it's fairly safe to say those who made the shift to takeout have a better chance of surviving. And everyone had access to the PPP to help keep them afloat. Yeah, I don't know.
It's funny, I still, try and attend all of my closings. So I travel a lot and drive around a lot. And it's weird from, it's not even county to county or town to town. It's almost at the neighborhood level. You'll see some areas where businesses and especially restaurants, I'll see whole strip malls that are completely vacant. And other places you'll go, a couple streets over and everything is thriving. So it really is at a very local, granular level how things are doing. And if you've got a good product, people will find you. If you've made the move to, online businesses, click and order, takeout, things like that, you're gonna, I think, be much more successful than if you're just a traditional sit down only type of restaurant. We've seen a lot of places that have had those large tents where they were having outdoor dining in the fall that shut down over the winter because it was too cold. And I'm not, I'm seeing some of them pop up, but as I'm driving around, I don't see as many now in the spring for people to start outdoor dining again. So I think it really is at a neighborhood level.
That's interesting.
All right, guys, I think we'll hop into the member minutes. So if we want to start with this, there are, I think, a few new faces here. So if there isn't a slide for you, please just let us know and we'll add one if you plan to be at the next meeting.
Maybe this is the time to stop the recording and close out David's presentation as far as recording. Does that sound like a good idea? And we'll do the market session offline, kind of.
Yeah, works for me.